The sky above Earth burned with the light of 10,000 departing ships. Linearial stood on the observation platform, her silver hair whipping in the wind as the last of the human evacuation fleet tore through the atmosphere. The elf sorceress had seen many things in her 3,000 years of life, but nothing quite like this. They were supposed to have 3 more cycles. The imperial decree had been clear. Humanity had 90 standard days to gather their belongings and leave Earth forever. The Emperor himself had signed the Banishment order, and the Galactic Council had approved it with overwhelming votes. Earth would become a nature preserve, and humans would be relocated to colony worlds on the outer rim. But humanity had other plans. Linearial watched as another massive transport ship lifted off from what used to be New York. The humans had dismantled the entire city in just 60 days. Not abandoned it, dismantled it. Every building, every bridge, every piece of infrastructure had been carefully taken apart and loaded onto cargo vessels. The efficiency was terrifying. Behind her, Shadowmere shifted his massive bulk. The dragon was over 4,000 years old, his obsidian scales gleaming even in the dim afternoon light. He was larger than most buildings, his wings capable of blocking out the sun when fully extended. Shadowmere had been bonded to Linearial for 2 centuries, and in all that time she had learned to read his moods. Right now, he was uneasy. The dragon's deep voice rumbled in her mind through their magical connection. "Something is wrong with this picture, small one." Linearial nodded slowly. She had been thinking the same thing. The humans were not fleeing in panic. There were no riots, no resistance, no desperate pleas to the Emperor for mercy. Instead, they moved with military precision that seemed impossible for a species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel 200 years ago. She pulled out her data tablet and reviewed the reports again. The numbers made no sense. Humanity had evacuated 93% of their population already. They had moved 40 billion people off Earth in just 2 months. The logistics alone should have been impossible, but it was not just the people. They had taken everything. The oceans were 20% lower than they had been 3 months ago. Satellite imagery showed massive pumping operations that had drained trillions of gallons of water into specialized tanker ships. Mining operations on the moon had been completely stripped. Not a single piece of equipment remained. Even the International Space Station was gone. The humans had cut it into sections and hauled it away. Linearial had been appointed by the Emperor himself to oversee the transition. She was supposed to ensure that humanity left peacefully, and that Earth's ecosystems remained intact for its new purpose. But the humans had barely acknowledged her presence. They filed their departure manifests on time, answered her official inquiries with polite efficiency, and then ignored her completely. She walked to the edge of the platform, looking out over the empty cityscape. The wind howled through skeletal skyscrapers that humanity had left standing, only because they ran out of time to dismantle them. In another week, even those would be gone. A ship descended nearby, its engines washing hot air across the platform. Linearial shielded her eyes and watched as a single human woman stepped off the landing ramp. She wore a dark blue uniform with silver insignia that Linearial recognized as military rank. The woman was tall, with short black hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Shadowmere growled low in his throat. "That one is dangerous," the woman approached with confident strides. She stopped a respectful distance away and gave a slight bow. When she spoke, her voice was calm and professional. "My name is Commander Amy Reeves. I am the last official representative of humanity on Earth. I am here to inform you that evacuation operations will be complete in 72 hours. All departure manifests have been filed with your office." Linearial studied the woman carefully. Amy Reeves looked young by human standards, perhaps 40 years old, but her eyes held something much older, something that reminded Linearial of veteran soldiers she had known across the centuries. "You are ahead of schedule. The Empire gave you 90 days. Amy smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We saw no reason to delay. When someone tells you to leave, you leave." Linearial felt a chill run down her spine. There was something in the way Amy said those words. Not defeat, not resignation. Something else entirely. The Emperor expects humanity to integrate peacefully into your new worlds. There are colony planets prepared for your people, good worlds with resources and space to grow. Amy looked up at the sky where the last few ships were still climbing toward orbit. "Is that what you call it when you take someone's home and scatter them across the galaxy?" Linearial stiffened. I did not make this decision. I'm only here to ensure the transition is peaceful. Of course. Amy's smile widened slightly. You are just following orders. We understand that concept very well. The dragon behind Linearial shifted again, clearly agitated by the conversation. Shadowmere's voice filled her mind once more. This human knows something we do not. Be careful, Linearial chose her next words carefully. Humanity will thrive in the colony worlds. The Empire is not cruel. You will have everything you need to rebuild your civilization. Amy laughed then. A short, sharp sound. Commander Reeves reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out a small data chip. She held it out to Linearial. This contains the final status reports for Earth. Every building we dismantled, every resource we extracted, every person we evacuated, all properly documented for your records. We followed every rule in your precious decree. Linearial took the chip, noting how cold Amy's fingers were when they briefly touched. Thank you. This will be forwarded to the Imperial Archives. Amy turned to leave, then paused. She looked back over her shoulder, and for just a moment, Linearial saw something flicker in those dark eyes, something that might have been pity. Tell your Emperor something for me. What is that? Tell him he made a grave mistake. Before Linearial could respond, Amy walked back to her ship. The engines roared to life, and within moments the craft was lifting off, climbing up toward the stars where the rest of humanity waited. Linearial stood there holding the data chip, feeling the weight of those final words. Shadowmere's massive head lowered down beside her. What do you think she meant? Linearial had no answer. She returned to her quarters in the observation station, the only functional building left in a radius of 100 kilometers. The humans had even taken the roads when they left. Just removed the asphalt and concrete and hauled it away. She spent the next 3 days watching the final ships depart. True to Amy's word, the evacuation was complete exactly 72 hours later. The last transport lifted off from what used to be Tokyo, and then Earth was empty of humans at least. Linearial filed her reports with the Imperial administration. She noted the efficiency of the evacuation, the complete compliance with Imperial law, and the surprising lack of resistance. She did not mention Amy's final message. Something told her that would not be received well. She and Shadowmere remained on Earth for another month, overseeing the ecological surveys and preparing for the next phase. The Empire planned to introduce new species to Earth, to turn it into a living museum of galactic biodiversity. It would be beautiful, they said, a testament to the Empire's power and generosity. But at night, when Linearial stood on the empty platforms and looked up at the stars, she felt uneasy. Humanity had left too easily. They had been too efficient, too organized, too calm. Shadowmere felt it too. The dragon spent long hours flying over the empty continents, searching for something he could not name. When he returned, his ancient eyes were troubled. They took everything, he said one evening. Not just the things we can see. They took mineral deposits from deep underground. They harvested rare earth elements from the ocean floor. They even took genetic samples from every species on the planet. Why would they do that? The dragon settled his massive bulk on the observation platform, making the entire structure groan under his weight. They were not fleeing Linearial. They were gathering resources, as if preparing for something. 3 years passed. Linearial returned to her duties at the Imperial Court. She advised the Emperor on various matters, attended council sessions, and tried to forget about Earth. But she could not shake the memory of Amy Reeves standing in the wind, delivering that final warning. Then the reports started coming in. First, it was a mining colony on the outer rim. 3,000 people, gone. No distress signal, no sign of struggle, just silence, then a military outpost. 5,000 Imperial soldiers, vanished overnight. Search teams found nothing but empty buildings and deactivated defense systems. Then an entire planet, Vexus Prime, population 2 million. Every single person and ship disappeared in less than 6 hours. The Empire tried to keep it quiet, but panic spread through the core worlds. Something was hunting them in the dark spaces between stars, something that struck without warning and left no survivors. That was when Linearial received her new orders. The Emperor wanted her to investigate. He wanted to know what was destroying his empire from the shadows. Linearial stood before the Imperial throne, accepting her mission. The Emperor looked older than she remembered, his face line. "D with worry. Find out what is happening," he commanded. Take your dragon and investigate these disappearances. Report back immediately if you find anything." She bowed low and accepted the assignment. But as she left the throne room, Shadowmere's voice filled her mind with a single thought that made her blood run cold. "We both know what is doing this. The humans did not flee. They prepared. And now they are coming back." Linearial mounted Shadowmere's back, and together they flew toward the outer rim. Toward the darkness where entire worlds were going silent. Toward whatever humanity had become in the 3 years since they left Earth. Amy's final words echoed in her memory like a prophecy. He made a grave mistake. As they jumped through the first gate, leaving the safety of the core worlds behind, Linearial finally understood what Amy had meant. The Empire had not banished humanity. They had freed them from any reason to show mercy. And somewhere in the void, 40 billion humans were showing the galaxy exactly what they were capable of when pushed too far. Vexus Prime hung in space like a corpse. The planet still had atmosphere and gravity and all the things that made a world habitable. But it was empty now. 2 million people had lived here just 10 days ago, and now there was nothing but silence. Linearial guided Shadowmere through the upper atmosphere, scanning the cities below with her magical senses while the dragon used his ancient eyes to search for any sign of life. They found none. The capital city stretched out beneath them, perfectly intact. Buildings stood undamaged. Vehicles sat parked in streets. Lights still glowed in windows powered by automated systems. But not a single living soul remained. It was as if someone had simply erased every person from existence. Shadowmere landed in the central plaza, his massive claws scraping against stone that had been laid by Imperial workers 300 years ago. Linearial dismounted and walked through the empty streets, her hand resting on the crystal focus that channeled her magic. The silence was oppressive. She entered the garrison command center, finding computers still running and displaying tactical data from the night of the disappearance. According to the logs, the garrison had detected incoming ships at 2300 hours local time. They had raised shields and scrambled fighter squadrons to intercept, then nothing. The log simply stopped at 2347 hours. No distress calls, no battle damage reports, no final messages, just a sudden end to all communications as if someone had flipped a switch. Linearial examined the tactical displays more carefully and found something that made her blood run cold. The defense shields had been active when the ships arrived. She could see that in the power consumption logs, but somehow the attacking force had bypassed them completely. That should have been impossible. Imperial shields were the finest in the galaxy, capable of stopping everything from kinetic weapons to energy beams to nuclear explosions, and yet something had passed through them as if they were not even there. She continued searching through the command center and found a small data fragment that had somehow survived in a backup system. It contained 3 seconds of external camera footage from the moment before everything went dark. Linearial played the footage. The screen showed the night sky above Vexus Prime filled with stars. Then suddenly 6 ships appeared. They were not like any vessels she had seen before. Their hulls seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making them appear as holes in space itself. The ships moved with impossible grace, flowing through the air like liquid mercury. One moment they were 10 kilometers away, and the next they were directly above the garrison. And in that instant, Linearial saw weapons fire, but these were not normal weapons. Beams of pure darkness shot from the ships, and where they touched the ground, everything simply vanished. Buildings, vehicles, people, all erased in an instant without explosion or debris, just gone. The footage ended. Linearial stood in the empty command center, her hands trembling. She had seen many weapons in her 3,000 years, but nothing like this. Nothing that could simply unmake matter itself. Shadowmere entered the building, his massive head barely fitting through the reinforced doors. His mental voice was grim when he spoke to her mind. "I found something you need to see." The dragon led her to the outskirts of the city, where the garrison had stored its military equipment. Rows of tanks and artillery and fighter craft sat in neat lines, all perfectly maintained and completely abandoned. But that was not what Shadowmere wanted to show her. At the far end of the storage yard, half hidden behind a warehouse, Linearial found a piece of wreckage. It was small, perhaps 3 meters long, made of a dark metal that seemed to shimmer when she looked at it directly. She approached carefully and ran her magical senses over the debris. Immediately, she felt something wrong. The metal was infused with technology that operated on principles she did not understand. It bent space around itself in subtle ways that her magic could barely detect. This is not Imperial technology. she said aloud. No, Shadowmere agreed. It is human linearial jerked back from the wreckage as if burned. She circled it slowly, examining every detail. The construction was elegant and efficient in a way that seemed impossible for a species so young. But there was more etched into one panel in letters so small she almost missed them, was a serial number and a name. TCS Phantom Strike. Morrison Linearial pulled out her data tablet and searched the Imperial records for that name. It took several minutes, but eventually she found a file, small and dismissive, about a human named Katie Morrison. According to Imperial intelligence, Katie Morrison had been a mid-level logistics officer in the Human Colonial Administration. Her file noted she had a degree in supply chain management and had spent most of her career organizing cargo shipments between Earth and the outer colonies. The file was marked with a single notation. Low threat assessment. Administrative personnel only Linearial stared at that notation and felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. The Empire had dismissed this woman as irrelevant, just another bureaucrat pushing papers in some forgotten office, but the wreckage told a different story. She spent the next week jumping from system to system, following the trail of disappearances. Each site was the same. Empty worlds or stations with no survivors and no clues except for occasional fragments of that strange dark metal, and on each fragment, she found the same name. Morrison Shadowmere became increasingly agitated as they traveled. The dragon had lived through the rise and fall of a dozen civilizations, and his instincts were screaming danger. These humans are not what the Empire believed them to be, he said one evening as they rested in orbit around a dead space station. They have been hiding their true capabilities for a very long time. Linearial had reached the same conclusion. She began digging deeper into human history, accessing Imperial archives that dated back to first contact 2 centuries ago. What she found disturbed her greatly. Humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel in the year 2247 by Imperial calendar. They had reverse-engineered the technology from a derelict alien ship they found drifting near their solar system. Within 50 years, they had spread to 24 star systems. Within a century, they had established colonies on 100 worlds. The Empire had watched this expansion with amusement. Humans seemed eager and energetic, but ultimately harmless. They traded peacefully, followed Imperial law, and caused no trouble. But now Linearial saw the pattern that Imperial intelligence had missed. Every human colony was positioned strategically. They controlled key trade routes and resource-rich systems. They built their stations near jump points that provided quick access to multiple regions of space. They established military bases disguised as research outposts on the fringes of Imperial territory. It was not random expansion. It was a carefully planned military deployment that had taken 200 years to complete, and the Empire had never noticed. Linearial found more records buried in classified databases. There had been incidents over the years, small conflicts where human ships had demonstrated unusual capabilities, weapons that performed better than they should, shields that held longer than expected, tactics that were too sophisticated for such a young species, but every time, Imperial analysts had explained it away as luck or coincidence or clever engineering. They had refused to see what was right in front of them because they could not imagine that humans might actually be dangerous. Shadowmere rumbled his agreement when she shared her findings. The dragon had suspected something like this from the beginning. They underestimated humanity because humans looked weak, he said, but strength is not always about size or age or magic. Sometimes strength is about patience and planning and the willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. Linearial received a priority message from Imperial Command 3 days later. Another colony had gone silent, this time much closer to the core worlds. They wanted her to investigate immediately. She and Shadowmere jumped to the system within hours. What they found was different from the other sites. This colony had not simply disappeared. Instead, there had been a battle. A real battle with ships and weapons and explosions. The space around the colony was filled with debris. Imperial warships floated dead in the void, their hulls torn open by weapons that had cut through armor like paper. Defense platforms had been reduced to molten slag, and the colony itself was a burning ruin on the planet below. But scattered among the Imperial wreckage were pieces of human ships. Linearial collected as much as she could, using magic to gather fragments and store them in sealed containers. When she examined them closely, she found technology that should not exist. These ships had AI systems more advanced than anything in Imperial space. They had engines that could bend reality itself to move faster than light. They had weapons that operated on quantum principles that Linearial barely understood, even with 3,000 years of knowledge, and on every piece, stamped into the metal or etched into circuit boards, she found manufacturing dates. The oldest fragments were over 30 years old. 30 years ago, humanity had still been living peacefully on Earth. They had been model citizens of the Empire, paying their taxes and following the rules and causing no trouble. But in secret, they had been building a war machine. Linearial sat in Shadowmere back aboard the Dragon in orbit above the ruined colony, surrounded by fragments of impossible technology, and finally understood the full scope of what had happened. The Empire had not banished humanity 3 years ago. Humanity had been preparing to leave for decades. They had seen the writing on the wall long before the Emperor signed any decree. They had known that eventually the Empire would turn on them, so they had prepared. They had built weapons in secret and trained soldiers in hidden bases and designed ships that could fight an empire. They had evacuated not in panic but as the final phase of a plan that had been generations in the making, and now they were putting that plan into action. Shadowmere mind touched hers with a single urgent thought. We need to find their main fleet before they strike at the heart of the Empire. Linearial nodded and began plotting jump coordinates. According to her analysis of attack patterns, the human fleet was operating out of a region known as the Kronos Nebula, a massive cloud of gas and dust where sensors did not work properly and where hundreds of star systems lay hidden. It would take them 2 weeks to reach it as Shadowmere engaged the jump drive. Linearial composed a message to the Emperor. She detailed everything she had found: the advanced technology, the decades of preparation, the strategic genius behind the human campaign. She ended with a warning that she knew would not be heeded. Do not underestimate them again. They are far more dangerous than anyone believed possible. The message fired off into hyperspace just as Shadowmere made the jump behind them. Another Imperial colony went silent, and somewhere in the dark, Katie Morrison Ghost Fleet moved to its next target, erasing the Empire one world at a time. The Imperial capital world of Celestera gleamed like a jewel among the stars. Linearial had been summoned back by direct order of the Emperor himself. Her investigation cut short, just as she was about to enter the Kronos Nebula where the human fleet was hiding. The message had been terse and formal, demanding her immediate return to face questioning before the High Council. Shadowmere flew through the palace approach corridors, his massive wings folded tight against his body as they navigated the elaborate security checkpoints. The dragon was quiet, his mental voice subdued in a way that Linearial had never experienced before. Something felt wrong. They landed in the grand courtyard where 100 elite guards waited in formation, all of them armed with weapons designed specifically to fight dragons. Linearial felt a spike of fear as she dismounted, her instinct screaming danger. Ambassador Linearial, a voice called out. You are commanded to appear before the Emperor and the High Council immediately. Your dragon will remain here under guard. Shadow Mere growled low in his throat, the sound rumbling through the courtyard like distant thunder. The guards tensed, raising their weapons slightly. Linearial placed a hand on the dragon's massive neck, trying to calm him. It will be fine. She sent through their bond. I will return soon. The dragon did not respond, his ancient eyes fixed on the palace entrance where more guards were emerging. Linearial walked alone through the marble halls of the Imperial Palace, escorted by 6 guards who kept their hands on their weapons. She had walked these halls 1,000 times before, but today they felt different, oppressive and hostile. The throne room doors opened before her, revealing the assembled High Council. 23 members sat in their elevated seats, representing the major species and factions of the Empire. The Emperor himself sat on the central throne, his face carved from stone, cold and unyielding. At the base of the throne stood Lord Vakris, the head of Imperial Intelligence, a thin elf with eyes like ice chips. Linearial knelt in the traditional manner, her head bowed. Your Majesty, I have come as commanded. The Emperor did not speak immediately. Instead, Lord Vakris stepped forward, holding a data tablet. Ambassador Linearial, you have been investigating the attacks on our colonies for 3 months, yet you have provided no actionable intelligence, no tactical advantages, nothing that has helped us stop these assaults. Linearial raised her head. I have sent detailed reports, my lord. The humans have technology far beyond what we estimated. They have been preparing for decades. They are not the simple species we believed them to be. Lord. Vakris smiled coldly. Yes, your reports have been quite interesting, particularly your theories about human military genius and advanced weaponry. The way he said the word theories made it clear he did not believe her. You have spent considerable time analyzing human capabilities, the intelligence chief continued. Some might say you have become fascinated with them, perhaps even sympathetic. Linearial felt ice form in her stomach. I am loyal to the Empire. I seek only to understand our enemy so we can defeat them, do you? Lord Vakris circled her slowly. And yet you have not engaged the human forces even once. You investigate their attacks after they happen. You collect their technology, you study their tactics, but you never actually fight them, because engaging them without understanding them would be suicide. Linearial said firmly, They have destroyed entire battle groups, my lord. I am one elf and one dragon against a fleet that has annihilated thousands of Imperial soldiers. The Emperor finally spoke, his voice like grinding stone. We believe you have been compromised, Ambassador. We believe the humans have somehow influenced you, turned you against your own people. Linearial stared in shock. That is insane, Your Majesty. I have served the Empire for 3,000 years. I would never betray my people. Prove it, the Emperor commanded. Tell us where the human fleet is hiding. I believe they are in the Kronos Nebula, but I have not confirmed this yet. I was on my way to investigate when you recalled me. And yet you hesitate to give us the coordinates, Lord Vakris said smoothly. Why is that? Ambassador, because sending a fleet into that nebula without proper intelligence would be exactly what the humans want. Linearial shot back. They are luring us into a trap, or perhaps you are protecting them. The Emperor said quietly before Linearial could respond. The throne room doors exploded inward. Shadowmere crashed through the entrance, his massive body filling the chamber. Guards scattered like leaves as the dragon roared with a sound that shook the palace foundations. The bond, Shadowmere voice thundered in Linearial mind, but also in the minds of every person in the throne room. I will be silent no longer. Council members shouted in alarm. Magical wards activated. Guards rushed forward with their weapons, but Shadowmere ignored them all, his ancient eyes fixed on the Emperor. You want to know why she defends the humans? The dragon said, speaking aloud now in the ancient tongue that all species could understand. You want to know why she questions your wisdom? Then I will tell you the truth that my kind has kept hidden for 5,000 years. The throne room fell silent. We dragons did not come from your worlds, Shadowmere continued, his voice filling the vast chamber. We came from Earth. We were born on that blue planet long before any of you discovered space travel impossible, Lord Vakris sputtered. Dragons have been bonded to elves since the dawn of civilization, yes, Shadowmere said, bonded. What a pleasant word for slavery, gasps echoed through the council. The dragon took a step forward, and every guard in the room raised their weapons. Shadowmere ignored them 10,000 years ago. We dragons flew freely among the stars. We had no masters, no bonds, no magical chains. We encountered humanity when they were still primitive, still learning to forge metal and build cities, but we liked them. There was something in humans that called to us, a fire in their spirits that matched our own. Some of us chose to stay with them, to teach them, to fly alongside them as friends and equals. Then the elves came. Shadow, mere massive head swung toward the Emperor. Your ancestors found Earth during one of their great explorations. They saw dragons and they wanted us, but we would not serve them willingly. So they created the bond. It was not a partnership, not a willing alliance. It was a spell woven into the very fabric of our beings, a magical enslavement that forced us to obey, to serve, to pretend we were content with our chains. And when humanity grew too strong, when they started to remember the old days when dragons flew beside them as brothers, your ancestors made them forget. They used magic to cloud human memories, to make them believe dragons had always belonged to elves. Then you took us away from Earth, scattered us across the Empire, and left humanity alone in their corner of space until 3 years ago. Linearial stood frozen, her mind reeling. She looked at Shadowmere, at the dragon she had believed was her willing companion for 2 centuries. How much of our bond was real, she asked quietly. The dragon turned his gaze to her, and his mental voice was gentle when it touched her mind alone. Our friendship is real, small one. The affection between us is true. But the choice was never mine to make. I am bound to you by magic older than mountains, and while I have grown to care for you, I have never been free. Tears streamed down Linearial's face. This is treason, the Emperor roared. Guards destroy that dragon. Energy weapons fired, magical spells launched. A dozen deadly attacks converged on Shadowmere from all directions. The dragon roared and unleashed his own power, ancient magic, older than the Empire itself, exploded from Shadowmere's body. The attacks dissolved before they could reach him, and the magical bonds that held all dragons in servitude shattered like glass across the Empire. On 1,000 worlds, dragons felt chains they had carried for millennia. Suddenly, Breakshadow. Mir lowered his head to Lenariel. "I am free now," he said, "and I offer you a choice. You can stay here with your empire, with your people, with the comfortable lies you have believed for 3,000 years, or you can come with me and face the truth, face what humanity has truly become, face a future that terrifies your emperor because he cannot control it." Lenariel looked at the emperor, at the High Council, at the empire she had served her entire long life. Then she looked at Shadowmere, truly looked at him for the first time, seeing not a bonded servant but a person who had endured slavery for 200 years and still chose to call her friend. "I choose truth," she said. Alarms blared throughout the palace. The massive viewing screens activated, showing space around Celestara. Dozens of human ships had appeared from nowhere, their dark hulls barely visible against the stars. "An attack," Lord Vakris screamed. "They are attacking the capital." Shadowmere laughed, a deep, booming sound. "No, they are giving us a chance to escape." One of the human ships moved closer to the palace, weapons charged but not firing. A fighter launched from its bay, moving with impossible grace and speed. It strafed the palace defenses, destroying weapons emplacements but carefully avoiding any strikes that would harm civilians. Lenariel watched, in awe as the fighter pilot demonstrated skill that should not exist. Shadowmere grabbed Lenariel gently in his claws and launched through the broken throne room doors. They flew through chaos as palace defenses fired at the human ships and returned. Fire carved precise holes in military targets without touching anything else. The fighter that had cleared their path swung alongside them, and through the cockpit window, Lenariel saw the pilot, a young human woman with short brown hair and a confident smile. She gave them a casual salute before accelerating away to draw fire from pursuing Imperial ships. Shadowmere flew hard toward the nearest human vessel, a massive carrier that opened its bay to receive them. They landed inside, and the ship jumped to faster-than-light speed before Imperial forces could react. Lenariel stood on shaking legs in the carrier hangar, surrounded by human soldiers who watched her with cautious eyes. A woman approached, tall and commanding, with silver hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. She wore a uniform marked with 5 stars and insignia that identified her as Supreme Commander. "My name is General Lisa Chen," the woman said. "Welcome aboard the TCS Liberator." Lenariel found her voice. "You planned this? You knew Shadowmere would break free. You knew I would need rescue." General Chen smiled. "We have been monitoring Imperial communications. We knew they were going to arrest you, possibly execute you for knowing too much about us. So you risked your fleet to save 1 elf." The general stepped closer. "We risked 1 carrier and 12 fighters, which for us is not much of a risk, but yes, we came for you." "Why, because Shadowmere asked us to," General Chen said simply. "He contacted us 3 months ago through channels we established with other dragons. He told us about you, about your search for truth, about your integrity. And because we need allies," she continued. "We are fighting an empire that spans 10,000 worlds. We cannot win through military force alone. We need people inside the empire to understand what we really are, what we are really fighting for." "Which is what?" Lenariel asked. "Freedom," General Chen said. "Not just for humanity, but for everyone who has been crushed under Imperial rule, including dragons who have been slaves for 5,000 years. Lenariel looked at Shadowmere, at the dragon who was no longer bound to her, who could leave at any moment. "He stayed. I am with you," the dragon said. "Both of you. Now we fight together as true companions." General Chen led them deeper into the ship. "Let me show you something." They entered a massive observation deck where hundreds of ships floated in formation around them, and among those ships Lenariel saw dragons, dozens of them, flying freely alongside human fighters in perfect coordination. "These are volunteers," General Chen explained. "Dragons who chose to break their bonds and join us. They fight beside us not because they must, but because they want to. One dragon flew close to the window, and Lenariel saw a human pilot riding on its back. But there were no reins, no saddles, no visible control mechanisms. Pure partnership, General Chen said. True bonding, based on choice. And trust. Lenariel felt her entire worldview crumbling and reforming. You did not wait for the banishment, she said quietly. You saw it coming years ago. 30 years ago, the general confirmed. Our intelligence predicted the Empire would eventually see us as a threat. So we began preparing. We built our fleet in secret. We trained our soldiers. We made contact with dragons and offered them what the Empire never did: freedom. That is why you left Earth so easily. We were already ready to go. General Chen said, the banishment just gave us legal cover to evacuate without raising suspicion. Lenariel laughed bitterly. The Emperor thought he was getting rid of a problem. He freed us from any obligation to show restraint, the general said coldly. Now we can fight without holding back, and you will win, Lenariel said, because the Empire still does not understand what it is facing. General Chen nodded. Which is why we need you. You understand both sides now. You can help us find a way to end this war with minimal bloodshed. Lenariel looked out at the fleet, at the dragons flying free, at the future the Empire refused to see. Then let me help, she said. Welcome to the Terran Coalition. General Chen extended her hand. Lenariel took it, sealing her fate and choosing a new path forward into a galaxy that would never be the same. The Terran Coalition fleet moved through the void like a living thing. Lenariel stood on the bridge of the TCS Liberator, watching dozens of ships coordinate their movements with a precision that seemed almost magical, but she knew it was not magic at all, but rather technology. So advanced it might as well be. General Lisa Chen stood beside her, reviewing tactical displays while human officers worked at their stations with calm efficiency. For 3 weeks now, Lenariel had traveled with the human fleet, and everything she saw challenged what she thought she knew about the universe. Shadowmere spent most of his time flying freely among the other dragons who had broken their bonds and joined the coalition. There were over 300 dragons, now ranging from young ones barely a century old to ancient beings who remembered Earth before the elves came. Each one had a story of slavery and chains, and the moment they felt those bonds shatter, Lenariel found herself drawn to these stories, listening to dragons speak of 5,000 years of servitude, hidden behind forced smiles and false contentment. One evening she sat in a massive hangar bay that had been converted into a gathering space for dragons. Shadowmere rested beside her while other dragons formed a circle around them, sharing memories and pain and hope for a future they had never dared imagine. An old dragon named Starfire spoke in a voice like crackling flames. I was bound to 17 different elves over my lifetime, she said. Some were kind and treated me well, believing our bond was natural and good. Others were cruel, using the magical compulsion to force me to fight in wars I did not believe in. But none of them ever asked if I wanted to be bound in the first place. The other dragons rumbled their agreement. Shadowmere's voice filled the space. The humans are different, he said. They do not seek to control us, but to partner with us. They offer something the Empire never did: choice as if summoned. By those words, a group of human pilots entered the hangar. They wore flight suits marked with insignia that Lenariel had learned to recognize as the Dragon Corps. These were humans who had volunteered to work alongside freed dragons, creating new forms of partnership. A young woman with red hair and confident bearing approached the circle. Her name was Major Kate Sullivan, and according to General Chen, she was the finest pilot in the entire coalition fleet. The Major bowed respectfully to the assembled dragon. Starfire, she said, addressing the old dragon. Are you ready to try again? The dragon shifted her massive bulk, and there was nervousness in her movements. What if it does not work? She asked. What if I am too damaged by the old bonds to form new ones? Then we will try again tomorrow, Kate said simply, and the day after that and the day after that until it works, or until you decide you do not want to try anymore. The choice is always yours. Starfire stood slowly and moved to the center of the hangar. Kate walked beside her, completely unafraid. Despite being smaller than one of the dragon claws, Lenariel watched fascinated as they prepared for what humans called neural fusion. Kate pulled a small device from her pocket and attached it to her temple. The device glowed with soft blue light, and Linearial could feel strange energy radiating from it. "This is a neural interface," Kate explained for the watching crowd. "It allows my mind to connect directly with Starfire consciousness, not through magical compulsion, but through voluntary technological bonding. We share thoughts and feelings and control of movement, but either of us can break the connection at any moment. It is partnership based on trust." Kate looked up at Starfire. "Are you ready?" The dragon lowered her massive head until it was level with the human pilot. "I am ready." Kate placed her hand on Starfire's scales and activated the neural interface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then both of them gasped as the connection formed. Linearial watched, in awe as their movements synchronized. Kate stepped back and Starfire reared up, spreading her wings wide. But it was not just the dragon moving. Kate moved with her. Their bodies separated by distance but united in purpose. They launched into the air, together flying through the massive hangar with a grace that took Linearial breath away. This was not the forced coordination she had seen with bonded dragons and their elf riders. This was true partnership, two minds working as one because they chose to, not because magic compelled them. Starfire performed aerial maneuvers that should have been impossible, weaving through support beams and around other ships with Kate guiding but not controlling, suggesting but not commanding. When they landed, both dragon and human were breathing hard, but their faces held identical expressions of joy. It worked. Starfire's voice was filled with wonder. I could feel her mind, but there were no chains, no compulsion, just cooperation. Kate grinned. "You are an incredible flyer," she said. "I have never experienced anything like that." Other dragons and pilots moved forward, eager to attempt their own neural fusions. Linearial watched as pair after pair connected, some successfully and others needing more time and practice. But, in every case, the humans respected the dragons' choices, never pushing, never forcing. General Chen appeared beside Linearial. "Impressive, is it not?" the general said. "This is what we have been building for 30 years. Not just weapons and ships, but genuine alliances based on mutual respect." Linearial turned to face her. "You have changed everything," she said. "The Empire will never recover from this." General Chen's expression grew serious. "The Empire has sent word," she said. "They are gathering their full armada. 10,000 warships will arrive at the Kronos Nebula in 10 days. They mean to destroy us completely." "How many ships do you have?" Linearial asked. 347, General Chen said, calmly. "We are outnumbered, almost 30 to 1. Linearial felt fear clutch her heart. "You cannot win against those odds." The general smiled. "Numbers are not everything," she said. "We have better technology, better tactics, better training, and most importantly, we have people who choose to fight, rather than people forced to fight. Come with me, there is more." "You need to see." General Chen led Linearial through the ship to a secure medical facility. Inside, scientists and doctors worked alongside soldiers in an environment that hummed with strange energy. The general gestured to the organized chaos around them. "This is Project Ascension," she explained. "For 30 years we have been enhancing ourselves. Not just our technology, but our bodies and minds. We knew we could not match the Empire in numbers, so we decided to create soldiers who could match them in capability." Linearial watched as a soldier stepped into a chamber filled with flowing light. When he emerged moments later, his eyes glowed faintly, and he moved with speed that seemed impossible. Genetic optimization, neural enhancement, cybernetic integration. General Chen listed, "We have pushed the boundaries of what it means to be human. Some call it evolution. Others call it desperate necessity. I call it survival." She led Linearial to an observation window overlooking a training facility. Below, dozens of soldiers practiced combat maneuvers, moving with coordination that rivaled magical enhancement. "Each one of them has capabilities that would take your empire decades to understand," General Chen said. "They can process information faster than any computer. They can react to threats before conscious thought. They can coordinate with each other through quantum-linked neural networks, and every single one of them volunteered for these enhancements." Linearial felt overwhelmed. You have transformed your entire species, she said. We have transformed those willing to transform, General Chen corrected. Not everyone chose enhancement. We still have billions of baseline humans living normal lives, but those who fight do so with every advantage we can provide. Over the next week, Linearial witnessed the Coalition final preparations for battle. She saw factories aboard massive industrial ships producing weapons at incredible speeds. She saw training simulations where human pilots fought against AI recreations of Imperial tactics. She saw dragons and humans practicing their neural fusions until they moved as single entities, and she saw the quiet moments between battles where soldiers wrote messages to loved ones knowing many would not survive the coming fight. Shadowmere found her one evening as she stood alone watching the stars. You are troubled, small one, the dragon said gently. Linearial nodded. I am about to watch my people die, she said. The empire that raised me, that gave me purpose for 3,000 years, will send its fleet into a trap. And I am helping to set that trap. Shadowmere was quiet for a moment. Do you regret your choice? He asked. Linearial thought about that carefully. She thought about the dragons she had spoken with, who had suffered in silence for millennia. She thought about humans who had been banished from their home world for no crime except existing. She thought about General Chen and Kate Sullivan, and all the others who fought not for conquest, but for the simple right to be free. No, she said finally. I regret that it came to this, but I do not regret choosing truth over comfortable lies. Shadowmere pressed his massive head against her gently. Then you have chosen well, he said. Some decisions are not between good and evil, but between the world that was and the world that could be. 2 days before the Imperial fleet was scheduled to arrive, Linearial was summoned to a strategy meeting. The Coalition command staff gathered around a massive holographic display showing the Kronos Nebula and surrounding space. General Chen stood at the center directing the presentation. The Empire believes we are hiding in the nebula, she explained. They will send their full fleet to surround it, cutting off any escape routes. What they do not know is that we are not hiding in the nebula. We are using it as a tactical advantage. The hologram shifted, showing Coalition forces positioned throughout the nebula at strategic locations. Their sensors will not work properly in the dense gas and dust, General Chen continued, but our sensors are designed specifically for these conditions. We will see them long before they see us. Admiral Katie Morrison appeared on a communication screen, her ghost fleet ready to strike from the shadows. Major Kate Sullivan stood with Starfire, both prepared to lead the Dragon Corps into battle. Commander Amy Reeves, the same woman who had warned Linearial 3 years ago, smiled grimly from her station aboard a stealth carrier. Every human officer looked calm and ready. Linearial realized with sudden clarity that this was not just a battle. It was the culmination of 30 years of planning and preparation. This was humanity's answer to an empire that had dismissed them as irrelevant. General Chen turned to Linearial. You know their tactics, she said. You know how the Imperial fleet operates. Will you help us end this war with as few casualties as possible? Linearial looked at the faces around her. Human and dragon united by choice, she thought. About the Empire coming to destroy them. 10,000 ships filled with soldiers who believed they fought for order and stability, never knowing they served a system built on lies and slavery, and she made her final choice. I will help, she said. Tell me what you need. General Chen nodded. We need you to send a message to the Imperial fleet when they arrive. Tell them they can still turn back. Tell them what they are really fighting for. Give them a chance to choose their own. Path Linearial felt tears on her cheeks, but she stood tall. I will do this, she said. The meeting ended and people dispersed to their stations. Shadowmere walked beside Linearial as they made their way to the communication center. You have become something new, the dragon said. Not quite elf and not quite human, but something in between. A bridge between worlds. Linearial smiled sadly. Or perhaps I have simply become what I always should have been, she said. Someone who values truth over tradition. The countdown began. 10 days became hours, hours became minutes. And across the galaxy, the Imperial fleet gathered for what the Emperor believed would be a glorious victory. But in the Kronos Nebula, 347 human ships waited alongside 300 free dragons and one elf sorceress who had chosen to stand with them. The Empire was about to learn a lesson that would echo through history. When you force someone to choose between chains and freedom, they will always choose freedom, and they will fight with everything. They have to keep it. The battle for the future was about to begin. The Imperial fleet arrived like a storm. 10,000 warships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Chronos, nebula filling the void with metal and firepower enough to shatter planets. Each ship was a monument to Imperial might, built over centuries of conquest and designed to crush any resistance through overwhelming force. Admiral Corvin commanded the fleet from his flagship, the Eternal Glory. He was a veteran of 100 campaigns, and he had never known defeat. From his command throne, he surveyed the tactical displays showing the nebula ahead where intelligence reported the human fleet was hiding. "This will be over quickly," he announced to his officers. "The humans are trapped in that nebula with nowhere to run. We will surround them, destroy them, and restore order to the galaxy." His fleet began its approach, moving in perfect formation as Imperial doctrine demanded. Thousands of ships arranged in precise geometric patterns, their shields overlapping to create an impenetrable wall of defense. They entered the nebula. Sensors immediately began malfunctioning as the dense gas and cosmic dust interfered. With their scanning systems, visibility dropped to almost nothing, with ships barely able to see their nearest neighbors. Admiral Corvin frowned but was not concerned. The humans would be even more blind than his forces. His confidence lasted exactly 12 minutes. Then the first wave hit. Human ships appeared from nowhere, striking from angles that should have been impossible. They were not where the sensors said they should be. They were faster than anything Admiral Corvin had ever seen, moving through the nebula like ghosts, sliding between Imperial formations and firing weapons that tore through shields as if they were paper. Admiral Katie Morrison, Ghost Fleet, led the assault. Her ships phased in and out of normal space using technology that bent reality itself. One moment they were solid targets, and the next they were shadows. Impossible to hit. Imperial commanders shouted orders, trying to coordinate defenses, but their formations were designed for open space combat. Not this chaotic nightmare where the enemy could strike from any direction. Then the dragons came. 300 of them flying freely without the hesitation that came from magical compulsion. They moved in perfect coordination with human pilots through neural fusion, creating a combat effectiveness that terrified the Imperial forces. Starfire and Major Kate Sullivan led the Dragon Corps. They dove through the Imperial fleet, targeting command ships and communication relays. Kate guided while Starfire executed each maneuver, a perfect partnership between human ingenuity and dragon power. Imperial dragon riders tried to respond, but they were hampered by the magical bonds that limited their dragons' natural abilities. The freed dragons fought with a fury born of 5,000 years of slavery. They remembered every indignity, every forced battle, every moment of chains, and now they were taking their revenge. Admiral Corvin watched his tactical displays in growing horror. As his fleet began to fragment, ships were going dark by the dozens. Entire battle groups were being systematically dismantled, and through it all, the human ships kept coming, relentless and precise. Lieutenant Commander Beth Anderson commanded one of those ships, the destroyer Phoenix Strike, moved through the nebula like it was born there. Beth was neurally linked to her vessel, feeling its systems as extensions of her own body. She could process tactical information faster than any organic mind, should be capable of making decisions in microseconds that saved her crew again and again. Her ship danced between enemy fire, targeting weak points in Imperial vessels with devastating accuracy. Weapons that used quantum entanglement to bypass shields entirely. Missiles that could think and adapt to countermeasures, energy beams that collapsed matter at the molecular level. This was warfare evolved beyond anything the Empire had prepared for. On board the Liberator, General Lisa Chen watched the battle unfold with calm satisfaction. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The Empire had brought overwhelming numbers, but numbers meant nothing when you could not effectively deploy them. The nebula negated their numerical advantage. Their outdated tactics made them predictable, and their reliance on magic over technology had left them vulnerable to weapons they could not comprehend. Beside her, Linnariel watched her former comrades die and felt her heart break, even as she knew this was necessary. Shadowmere pressed close, offering comfort. Through their reformed bond now chosen freely rather than magically enforced, the dragon spoke softly in her mind. This is the price of change. The old world must end before the new one can begin. Admiral Corvin realized he was losing his fleet, was in disarray with command structures breaking down and ships fleeing in panic. He opened a communication channel to all Imperial forces. All ships concentrate fire on Sector 7. We will punch through their lines and regroup beyond the nebula. But General Chen had anticipated this. She deployed her reserve forces directly into Sector 7. Fresh ships with full weapons and shields cut off the Imperial retreat. The trap was complete. Desperate now, Admiral Corvin made a fateful decision. He opened a priority channel directly to the Imperial capital. Your Majesty, we are suffering catastrophic losses. The humans have technology beyond our understanding. We need reinforcements. Request denied, came the Emperor cold response. You have 10,000 ships. Them but Your Majesty. The channel cut off. Admiral Corvin stared at the dead communication link and understood. The Emperor did not care about his fleet or the lives of the soldiers aboard. He cared only about his pride, about proving that the Empire could not be challenged. Something broke inside the Admiral. He looked at his tactical displays, at the burning wrecks that had been proud warships, at the names of dead crews scrolling across his screens, and he made his choice. All Imperial ships, this is Admiral Corvin. Cease fire immediately. He ignored the protests from his officers and opened a general broadcast. Humans of the Terran Coalition, I request terms of surrender. The battle stopped in the sudden silence. Ships on both sides held their fire. Uncertain General Chen voice came over the channel. Admiral Corvin. I am General Lisa Chen, commander of the Coalition forces. I accept your surrender. Stand down your weapons and we will discuss terms. But before negotiations could begin, a new ship appeared, the Arbiade. Emperor personal flagship. The Divine Majesty jumped into the system, ignoring all tactical sense in his rage. The Emperor voice boomed across all channels. There will be no surrender. Corvin, you are relieved of command and sentenced to death for treason. All ships resume attack immediately. This is a direct Imperial command. Admiral Corvin closed his eyes, knowing what was coming. Several of his ships obeyed the Emperor order, reopening fire on human vessels, but many did not. The fleet was fracturing as commanders chose between blind obedience and survival. The Emperor flagship moved toward the center of the battle, its massive weapons charging. Linarial knew what she had to do. Shadowmere, she said, take me to him. The dragon did not hesitate. They launched from the Liberator, flying through the chaos of battle toward the Divine Majesty. Human ships held their fire, giving them a clear path. Imperial ships, too confused to react, let them pass. They landed in the flagship main hangar, where Imperial guards immediately surrounded them. Linarial dismounted and walked forward with Shadowmere at her side. Take me to the Emperor, she commanded. I will speak with him. The guards hesitated, recognizing her but uncertain given her betrayal. Finally, they escorted her to the bridge. The Emperor sat on his command throne, his face twisted with fury. Linarial, he spat. Traitor, come to gloat over your victory. She approached him calmly. I have come to show you the truth, she said, to show you what you are really fighting. With a gesture, she activated a holographic display. It showed everything she had learned over the past months. Dragons speaking of their slavery, humans building their society on principles of freedom and choice. The neural fusion partnerships between species, the future that could exist if the Empire would only let go of its need to control. The Emperor watched in silence. When the display ended, he stood slowly. You show me cooperation between lesser species, he said. You show me dragons betraying their proper place. You show me humans who refuse to accept their role in the natural order. He walked to the viewport, looking out at the battle. And you call this truth? It is chaos. It is the end of everything we have built. Linarial moved to stand beside him. What we built was a lie, she said gently. A beautiful lie that made us feel superior, but a lie nonetheless. The Empire was never about order. It was about control. The Emperor turned to her and she saw something unexpected in his eyes. Fear. He is afraid, Shadowmere voice echoed, in her mind afraid that everything he believed is wrong. The Emperor voice was quiet when he spoke again. If I accept what you are showing me, then everything I have done for 5,000 years has been for nothing. Yes, Lineral said, and that is terrifying. But it is also freeing. You can choose to be something new. The Emperor stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled sadly. You are young, Lineal. Only 3,000 years old. You still believe people can change. He walked back to his throne. I am too old to change, too invested in what I have built. And so he reached for a control on his throne. Shadowmere roared a warning, but it was too late. The Emperor activated the self-destruct sequence for his flagship. If I cannot have victory, he said calmly, then I will have a glorious end. Alarms blared throughout the ship. Lineal ran, but Shadowmere was faster. The dragon grabbed her in his claws and launched from the flagship just as the self-destruct countdown reached 0. The Divine Majesty exploded in a burst of light that lit up the entire nebula. The shockwave sent ships tumbling, but Shadowmere flew hard, carrying Lineal to safety. Behind them, the Emperor, final monument to pride, dissolved into expanding gas and debris. With the Emperor dead, the Imperial fleet lost its will to fight. Admiral Corvin, who had survived the blast, took command again and officially surrendered. The battle was over. Humanity had won. 3 months later, Lineal stood on Earth's surface watching as the restoration work continued. Massive engineering ships hovered over empty ocean basins, pumping water back into play.